Welcome to Choose Views with Richard Chew.
Get ready to dive into a world of insightful conversations and thought-provoking discussions.
As progressives, our job is to have an all-inclusive, full-on assault with all of our players.
A show that will focus on moving our political, social, economic, gender, and cultural conversation forward.
And all of our players means all of our players.
It's Choose Views. And now, here's your host, Richard Chew.
Good Monday morning, progressives, and welcome to the December 20th, December 30th. And I'm looking at it, guys. I'm reading it. 2024 edition of Choose Views, 773-763-9278. Catch us on Facebook Live, TuneIn Radio, Twitter Stream, YouTube, iHeartRadio. Yes, you can email me at richard@WCPT820.com, and I will reply. Catch all of our shows there, our WCPT podcast, on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify, and you can get Choose Views, the old stuff, the newer stuff, the short version, the long version of my podcast, and of course my great friend Joan Esposito with Live, Local, and Progressive, Patty Vasquez, who is always driving us home with that hoopty of hers, making sure you guys wrap up your day well. Big Picture with Edwin Eisendrath and all of our other great shows that are on the weekends and throughout the course of the 24 hours that we're on the air. Check out our heartlandsignal.com digital platform, and that's where you can find lots of great stuff to share with your folks out there that you care about. So make sure you make your way over there. And welcome to the show. It is Monday morning, and it's great to be here. I hope you guys had a good weekend that are here in the Chicagoland area, because I had a conversation with one of my sisters-in-law about she chuckled when I said a few weeks ago not having to shovel the rain. I got a little bit of a pushback from some folks. One or two people that said, "Well, what about climate change, Richard? It's Chicago. It should be snow and And I'm like, yeah, I agree with that. It should be, but we don't have it. We have rain, and it rained all weekend. And guess what? If it had snowed all weekend, we'd still be, Devin, tell me I'm crazy. If it had snowed all weekend, the way in which it rained all weekend, you and I might not be here. We'd be here. But we would have had to shovel some snow. Because it rained pretty much most of the, well, let's see. It started raining when? Friday night a little bit. Yes. And then it rained most of the afternoon on Saturday, or latter part of the day. But it rained all day yesterday.
Yep, it's all night.
So, and but anyhow, we kid a little bit about the weather, and all I can tell you guys is that, as Devin said this morning, it was a little bit cooler this morning. So, got to deal with that. Be safe in your commutes today, as I always try to throw out at you at least a couple times a week. Be careful when you're commuting. If you're taking public transportation, give yourself a little extra time whenever the weather changes up, gets a little bit cooler, or if it's damp out, just make sure you give yourself a little extra time. And the same thing if you're driving. But yeah, so one of my sisters-in-law and I were laughing about not having to shovel the rain, and she, like I, am no longer a fan of shoveling snow. And we were joking, Devin, about when we were younger, how it was fun to get out and put on the clothes and go out and shovel the snow. And now our bodies are like, yeah, try that again and watch what I do to you. So, in any event, guys, it's Monday. We're 2 days. So, all right, last week I got the evil eye from my man Devin. Yes, I am. I got the evil eye from my man Devin when I refer to the 23rd of December as Christmas Eve. You should have seen the look. I can still see it because it's in my brain. And I literally thought about this morning, or sometime. I think it was early this morning. I said, so what are we going to call New Year's Eve, Devin? Did I miss a Seinfeld episode where there was a part of their dialogue, part of one of their episodes where they had a labeling on Seinfeld that was New Year's Eve. Uh-oh, he has an answer.
So I just Googled what is today, and today is National Bacon Day.
Bacon?
Day to celebrate bacon.
Well, one of my other sisters-in-law and I would definitely, she would appreciate that. I got to send her a text to let her know. I see if she knows that. Oh, wow, that's too funny. National Bacon Day. Some people don't like bacon, don't eat bacon for various reasons, and then there's others that consume lots of bacon. But I didn't know that, National Bacon Day. But there's no like there's no New Year's Eve tied to Seinfeld.
No.
Oh, man. You're breaking my heart, Devin. Anyhow, guys, today is the 30th, and we are coming up on the beginning of a new year. And I'll put it in the positive rather than the end of a year. Yes, we are wrapping up 2024 and about to start off 2025. And so the optimistic side of me says, keep healing up, keep getting yourself, recharged and getting yourself in position to be able to take on 2025 with all the vim and vigor that you can. And for those of us who recognize, who understand, and all of us should appreciate this statement, irrespective of culture, remember the shoulders you stand on when it comes to our ancestors and the work that they did to get us all to this point as a society. And we know that there's different communities that have had severely different plights in this thing that we call America. However, as we go forward, those of us who have our heads screwed on straight, because see, I'm of the mindset, and I wrote this down to make sure I didn't miss this, that progressives get criticized. Progressive liberal Democrats get criticized a lot for being, too lofty and too out there, and can't follow, can't all. What is it? Republicans fall in line and Democrats fall in love. Okay, whatever. You can do both. The difference is we tend to fall in line and fall in love, whereas the Republicans can't even find the way to fall in love. And I'm talking about that socially and politically. So as I talk about we as a community stouting up and being prepared for where we're headed, I say that with the love and the care that comes with our ancestors and what our ancestors have done for us to get us here, of all communities. And when we think about it like that, that's why we do have this thing in the Democratic Party or progressive liberal Democratic conversation, and that's a big tent. And sometimes a big tent gets us into a little bit of, the phrase that I've used for years is like herding cats. It is. But when cats get lined up, cats get stuff done. And so I'm asking everybody as we wrap up 2024 and start a new 2025 that you heal up, that you get your heads right, you get your spirits right, and you think about your ancestors. We had a wonderful call last week. And by the way, the number, of course, is 773-763-9278. Call and or text us. We had a wonderful caller last week. Her name is April, and she talked about the fact that, she appreciates what we do here. And part of my mission, but part of my mission is to make sure that you guys know you still have a place to land, and you still will be embraced by this 84-inch wingspan to let you know that we're here to give you the support and the ideas and the conversation that you need every day to stay strong and keep moving forward. And we can do all the above. We can be positive and aspirational and forward moving as we have to be, not should be. We have to be that way. And then do that with content and subject matters that are important to us as we go along. So I just wanted to remind everybody that is where we are as we wrap up this year, and we will have a live show tomorrow. And then on Wednesday, we've got another best of sort of broadcast that the guys have kind of helped us put together. But that's where I want you guys to try to be, and be reminded of that, and then be focused on how we have to lean. The reason I use lean in and stand stout is when you have headwinds, you have to do that sometimes. You have to kind of reposition your legs so that you can withstand what's coming toward you. And we're capable of that. And here's the other thing. When you're in that position, just picture this for a moment. When you're in that position, you're able to not only withstand what comes at you, towards you, but you're also able to then push back. If you're just standing there kind of, in the wind has much more of an opportunity to push you in a direction that it wants to push you. And these political winds, these social and economic winds that are coming our way are fully capable of doing that, and certainly desirous of doing that. But if you position yourself physically, mentally, emotionally, and as I said, even financially, to withstand the winds coming, you're also you're in the ready position, as my brother-in-law Jim used to say, standing in the he would tell me, Rich, always be standing in the ready position. And so, that he also was a former Marine, so there's a big part of that. But you all know what I'm talking about. And being inspirational and aspirational in this, where we're headed, we want to be standing in the ready position. And that standing in the ready position gives you the power and the leverage to withstand and to push back. It's a hell of a lot easier when you're standing in the ready position. So as we do wrap up in today's show and tomorrow's show, we want to make sure that you guys are standing in the ready position and we come out fighting on January 2nd. Seriously. Because the gentleman that we just lost, Jimmy Carter, former president, late president now, was always standing in the ready. And was, in my observation in my lifetime, he always was standing in the ready position and getting things done. He took action. So we'll talk about that. And I wanted to merge into that subtly. We don't have to be sad about losing President Carter. And I'm going to probably refer to him just as President Carter today so I don't keep bumbling over my words. We don't have to be sad about President Carter. We should be inspired by him. And his death is not a loss, because that would mean that we were focusing on, I get where people might be coming from. All the great things that he did and all the things that he's more known for than that moment in time in 1980 in terms of that election. And I'm going to talk about that when we come back. But I'm going to put this question to you guys before we go to this quick break, because I'll be talking about this off and on throughout the course of the show and with other things that we need to cover. What are some of your highlights or high points or high moments or memories about the late President Jimmy Carter? I'd like to hear from you guys in that space, whether you send me a text or you call in. I want to know, what your experiences were, your thoughts were, what your memories are of late President Carter. I'm going to share, I have a number of them, and I know that you guys do as well. So we'll take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about the late President Jimmy Carter. His number is 773-763-9278. We'll be right back.
Good morning. You're waking up with Richard Chew.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning.
We're live and ready to hear from you. Text or call us now at 773-763-9278. Same number. Simple as that.
Let's get the conversation going
on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
Hey guys, welcome back to Choose Views, 773-763-9278. Thanks for being with us, and shout outs to those who have had comments already about late President Carter. All right, so where do I start with late President Jimmy Carter? There's so much that I want to say. I'll say some things as succinctly as I can. And I'm going to get into some of the controversial things that took place in the 1980 election. We have to. We wouldn't be doing the service as being good progressives and talking about these things if we don't. And, we'll get to that and try to lean into it a little bit this morning. So President Carter's the first presidential election that I voted for, first presidential election that I voted in 1980. I was a freshman in college, had just gotten in my first semester of college, and voted for President Carter. I was pretty politically aware. People that will tell you, family will tell you, and those who've known me over the years, that I sat in front of the black and white television, big old Zenith Council television, and watch Watergate. When I talk about that, people go, "No wonder you're, or where you are when it comes to politics or social issues." I looked at that as much as a political thing as a social thing in terms of the Watergate trial. So I go, that goes back for me, and I'm, was active even as a kid, a young kid, with the assassination of Dr. King, assassination of Malcolm, assassination of Bobby Kennedy. So I was plugged in at an early age. So that paint got swapped on me then. But, I go through the 70s, and I remember that, my brother-in-law at the time worked. My brother-in-law was in the Marine Corps, and he served as one of the budget folks that President Carter had appointed as a group of military servicemen to work on new ways to better our U.S. Federal budget, but also our military expenditures. So my brother-in-law was part of that, this select group of folks that got to be a part of that. And so I got to experience indirectly a thing known at the time as zero-based budgeting. And you guys can Google that and see what it was all about. But my brother-in-law was one of the members of that team. And so, you know, I had different observations than many kids at that time because I was, you know, a teenager at that point. But by the time I got through high school and started college, so the summer of '80 was my graduating summer from high school. And of course, we were in the throes of the we were in the throes of the hostages being taken. We hadn't gotten yet to Iran-Contra, but we were headed in that direction because of what happened with the hostages. And that was a horrible, horrible, horrible time for so many families across the globe. And our president was the one that, as he said, ordered the rescue and ended up having to cancel it. And a whole travesty of things with helicopters in the desert. I mean, it's if you're old enough to remember it, go back and revisit it. And if you're not old enough to remember it, go back and visit it, because it'll really give you some eyes into how we went in a weird direction as a country that we haven't ever really come back from when it relates to Republican politics. And you'll see what I'm talking about. I'm trying not to, and inevitably I'm going to talk about Ronald Reagan, who was the governor of California that was running against. He wasn't governor. He was running against. Excuse me. He ran against President Carter, sitting president. President Carter was a one-term president. First election I voted in, and I voted for President Carter. He did not win. Handed a very severe loss. And there's all kinds of conversations around what Reagan and Bush were doing when it comes to the hostages. And that's a whole nother conversation. That's an entire week's show, if not longer. But my memories of President Carter were not just of his presidency, but things that he did, like so many people have had this, we've talked about this, when it comes to improving our environment. This dude was all about let's find ways to reduce our consumption when it comes to certain things, and oil was one of them. And I remember, you know, turn the thermostat down and put a sweater on. That, you know, I'm paraphrasing, but that came out of the Carter administration, and for us to be a little bit more energy independent. And he was leaning into what do we need to do when it comes to solar energy. And if you all remember, who are old enough, and those who are maybe not chronologically old enough, but do study history, solar panels. And what president wanted them on the White House, and what president decided to get rid of them. So there were some arcs that took place during President Carter's time in office, and seat belts. I mean, there's a number of things that during his presidency we don't necessarily know about. One of the things that he did, which is sort of somewhat Biden-esque, is that he brought some stability to the presidency. Think about this for a minute. Nixon had just, left office, and then Ford stepped in, and we know where all that went. But there was some instability in how people viewed the U.S. presidency because of Nixon. And then President Carter comes in as this, selfie-facing, mild-mannered kind of dude, and restabilizes at least the imagery of the United States president. Now, from a policy standpoint and from a decision-making standpoint, there's always going to be questions around different things. The Camp David Accords were huge, and the irony is that the Middle East did play a part in his loss in the 1980 election. But that doesn't change the fact that during his time in office, he was a guy that was trying to do things to move the country forward and bring as many people along with him. He wasn't divisive while in office. He was matter of fact and could be a micromanager by all readings. But he was a dude that was about, let's bring the country forward. Let's move the country forward, because he knew that the temperature of the country post-Nixon, and even to some extent forward, was a little salty. So I liked that part of President Carter. Formative years in high school, he was president, and that's so I have a maybe a slanted view toward him during his presidency. I've heard many people that were highly upset with him because of gas prices and OPEC. And I remember conversations where people said, don't talk about President Carter because he's a bum. And I didn't see it that way. And this is while he was in office and post office and all the rest. Because I'm going to flip the script a little bit on this conversation that oftentimes the Christian right wants to have. And they want to have this conversation about what God would do and what Jesus would do and this, that, and the other. And they leave this man out of the conversation. Because post-presidency, y'all understand this. Late President Carter did far more for the country and the world post-presidency than any president in our lifetime. And you could roll up Barack and Bill and soon to be Biden, all of the Democratic presidents. You could roll them all up together and say post-presidency, they don't even carry half the water that President Carter carried post-presidency. And so that to me is more of a measure of the person with Habitat for Humanity and all the other things that he had his thumb and hands in. Married forever, and let's talk about that for a second. Married forever, y'all. I mean, by comparison, what has George Bush Jr. done post leaving office? Nothing to further the goods of humanity. And I could say that President Obama and President Clinton could have done more. I mean, we could always do that. But what we do know for a fact is President Carter, his resume post-office is legendary. It's stuff that anybody, business, social, public, private sector, could learn from. And so for me, that's the thing that is one of my biggest memories and thoughts that I will always have about him. I mean, he served in the Navy. I mean, the dude did it all. He started local when it comes to politics. It's so that again, he understood that, the one of the most important things was right there in your face, talking to folks. And that's kind of the foundation of Habitat for Humanity, is helping folks right there in the community. And he did that very, very well. And so let me put it this way. And I know I'll come back to some of these things later. But the other thing that I'm so thankful for is that he was unapologetically a Democrat. Southern Democrat at the time, transitioned the party in that regard. He was the person that kind of moved the Democratic Party away from some of the Southernisms that were there. A lot of people don't realize that. He was the one. He was the first Democratic president after the Civil Rights Amendment. I mean, Johnson was still in office. Johnson was in office during the signing of that. He signed it. But my point is, he was the first Democrat elected to presidency post the Civil Rights movement and amendment. And that means something, because we had two Republican presidents that were part of the shifting of the Republican Party, if you recall. And that's a big deal. That Republican Party shifted from the Dixiecrat style, which became the Republican Party's style. You got to know your history. This is why they don't want you to know about history. They want to take it away. They don't want you to talk about it. They don't want you to read about it. Because when you do take the time and you really do look at the transitions, there's many transition points in our country. You go, oh, wait a minute, I didn't know that at all. Certainly not then. And then the impact or the domino effect of it happening. And President Carter was the first Democrat elected president post the Civil Rights Amendment being signed. And if you all do a little bit of history in terms of some of the commentary that came at Lyndon Johnson post that being signed, in terms of we've lost the South for a generation, you'll see what that really means. So President Carter, like any of us, imperfect as the day is long, and reveled in his imperfection. And I'll talk about one of the things that he said that I found as a young man, a teenager, to be very eye-opening. Well, I'll talk about that when we come back from this break. 773-763-9278. We'll be right back.
It's Choose Views with Richard Chew on WCPT 820, where facts matter.
Hey, guys, welcome back to Choose Views, 773-763-9278. Yeah, we're over here dealing with technology. The computer wants to shut down. Got a nice text from Nancy. She said, I remember that President Carter, let me take these glasses off. President Carter and his wife, Rosalind, decided to put their daughter, Amy, in public grade school. That was so awesome. I was able to obtain Pell Grants to go to college because my parents did not make enough money to help me out. There are many of us that had that opportunity. So kudos for sharing that with us. And there are so many Americans that were benefactors of Pell Grants, and the list goes on and on. But let's go to one of our great friends and historians, real-time historians, Kurt from Akron, Ohio. Good morning, Kurt. How you doing, man?
I'm doing okay, all things considered. But you know what? You're right. We shouldn't feel sad for Jimmy Carter. Over 100 years of life.
Yeah.
And you know what? No one's ever going to match it.
Nope.
Not a Democrat, not a Republican.
Nope.
But real quickly, before we go into the fact-based stuff, back when I was a kid, I used to collect campaign memorabilia.
Okay.
And this was like from 1984 to 2010. It just got too big for me to house, so I sold it back in 2010.
Okay.
But back in 2006, I was sending letters and emails to candidates and campaigns all over the country asking for campaign pins. One of them happened to be Chip Carter, if you remember.
Oh, my gosh.
Chip Carter was the guy, the Democrat running for the U.S. Senate in Nevada, right?
Yep.
So I got a card in the mail from Chip Carter's wife at the time. And inside, she had a handwritten note in a little baggie, like a little Ziploc baggie. And inside it was one of President Carter's peanut lapel pins that she gave me because my letter was so moving to her that she thought she's going to give me one of President Carter's actual pieces of jewelry.
Wow. That's too funny, man. I mean, you know, these are the things that, from a historical perspective, one of the things that I love and appreciate about how you've been one of those people that understands the importance of knowing what we used to do, what we did, how we got here, and incremental things, the factual things that you stay on top of, but also the experiential things like that. You know, I appreciate what you said too, and what I said about not being sorrowful. When my mom passed away back in 2018, I was talking to a good friend of mine, and he said, "How are you feeling?" I said, "I'm feeling great." I said, "You know, I'm gonna miss my mother. She was a great lady." Challenging, complicated, tough, loving, all those things. I'm going to miss that, but I'm going to try to remind myself of her body of work. Because for me to be sorrowful would be selfish. I want to embrace the goodness that she brought. And I feel the same way about President Carter. We're going to miss him. We're going to miss what he did for us. But I want us to be inspired. If anything, you know, I know I sound kind of goofy with some of y'all when I say this, but I look at some of the things that we have to take from his passing as a tool. When we talk about shoulders we stand on, his shoulders are ones that we stand on, and we should be able to take what he brought to so many people and use, particularly at this time, Kurt, where we're headed, to be able to stand on that and say, how do we further his legacy by making sure that we stand in the void when it comes to democracy? I would think he would want us to be more mindful that way than to be sad about his passing. I mean, am I crazy, or what do you think?
No, you're not. No, you're not. But here's the thing. Look at what, and I'm going to say failures because there were, and by historic perspectives, they were some failures. But see, again, you go back to you learn from your failures, right?
Yep.
Look at the failures with the quote-unquote hostage negotiations back in the 70s and with the high inflation and everything that we were suffering. The double-digit inflation, people, can you imagine if you're like 45, 50 years old and now you're dealing with 2.4% inflation, you're having a crap fit about that? Imagine 12% inflation. But anyway, Joe Biden, like you said, he stood on the shoulders. If it wasn't for Jimmy Carter's quote unquote failures, and I'm not saying that in a disrespectful way, just think what might have not been able to happen in terms of lowering inflation from 9.1% down to where it is today before he leaves office, to the situation with the hostages in Israel and Gaza right now.
Yep.
I mean, look at the successes that Joe Biden has had because he, like so many people should be in that position, is a student of history, and he learned from Jimmy Carter's mistakes and Jimmy Carter's failures. And again, I go back to those aren't to be ashamed of. Those are things to learn from. And the one main point you missed about 1980, and I don't know if I might have missed it or what, Ronald Reagan was a big factor. There's no doubt about it. But the one thing we're missing in that whole thing is Ted Kennedy.
Oh God! Don't even get me started. I didn't even want. You're right in saying I missed it, but in my notes I actually skipped over it. And I'll let. I know what Kurt's talking about. I'll let Kurt talk about it because I'm going to get. I might say something I shouldn't say. Yeah. So you take that one because I know exactly what you're talking about. Go for it, my man.
Ted Kennedy kind of strikes me as a spoiler like Bobby Kennedy Jr. was in the past election.
Yep.
And Ted Kennedy did a lot more great things than Bobby Kennedy Jr. can ever even put a stick to, even as Secretary of Health and Human Services in the next 4 years. But Ted Kennedy was a spoiler, and he seized on a situation that Jimmy Carter was basically thrust into when the hostages were taken in Iran. And then, like you said, that whole conversation about Reagan pulling a Nixon, like Nixon did in 1968 with North and South Vietnam,
right,
and all that stuff. And when an incumbent is challenged in a primary going into a reelection, they're bloodied and they're bruised more than people think they are. That happened with Lyndon Johnson in 1968 with Bobby Kennedy and Eugene McCarthy.
Yep.
That happened in 1976 with Gerald Ford up against Ronald Reagan. That happened in 1992 with Pat Buchanan and George H.W. Bush. So, there is history there for that. And, that's where Jimmy Carter's problem started, was a few days after the hostage situation when Ted Kennedy seized on that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like Joe Biden, Carter wasn't really going to participate so much in campaigning in 1980. He was busy presidenting to try and get those hostages out of Iran before the election. And to his credit, he did do that. Unfortunately, the media didn't give him the credit because they made it look like as soon as Reagan took his hand off the Bible, that's when they were freed.
Well, and what's a similarity that we're about to see again with that, Democratic president? It's fixing the problems, handing off something that should be handed off to the next president, and they take credit for it. We're about to see that happen again.
Well, here's the caveat to that. And I have it, and I sent you the link to the audio collection of the 1980 presidential election that I built. Jimmy Carter, like 7 hours before that inauguration in 1981, he got the call saying that those hostages were on the plane heading to Germany at 5 a.m. in the morning.
Yep.
But they kept that quiet until after Reagan took his hand off the Bible.
I have a direct, we'll call it a couple of degrees of separation from that.
Come on, Kevin Bacon. What are you going to
say? Well, not only to the point of where they were Wiesbaden Air Base.
Yeah.
Where I went to college was just where I went to college had a extension program in Germany and in Heidelberg, Germany, and so if one of my classmates ended up being one of the people, and I'll have to. This gets into the nerd moment of my brain, but long story short, she happened to be there and interviewed one of the hostages in a weird sort of way that is only for the lore of what can happen in with a situation like this. But you're right. Not a lot of people know that that they were basically. They had been freed already, and the credit went to Reagan and the media needed that more so than they needed to tell the truth. And it sort of set us on a course. And this is when I say Reagan's presidency. Former President Obama talks about Reagan's presidency was, an arc-changing event for a lot of different things. And this is one of them in terms of how the media actually covered truth and then shielded Reagan. And that continued during his first term with the Iran-Contra affair, as we all know. But that's a good point, Kurt. I'm glad you highlighted that about what really went down, what was really going down behind the scenes, and how he was such a good man that he didn't need to run out and say, "Hey, I did it," meaning President Carter.
I will tell you, Richard, and I will tell you that conversation before the inauguration is actually in that audio that I built. And here's the other thing people might not remember. Russia was actually communist back in those days. And if you remember, Jimmy Carter boycotted the Summer Olympics because of it being in Moscow.
Sure did. So this is one of those moments, and thank you, Kurt, for reminding me. I didn't forget that, but it just wasn't top of mind in my notes. Yeah, that was a hugely impactful event that he said, no, we're not doing it.
He had guts.
He did. He had those quiet guts. It's the dude sitting in the room or the lady sitting in the room that's not saying a hell of a lot, but they're the ones that's collecting all the data and making all the moves.
And if you think about it, he did not return to the White House until Bill Clinton had that peace summit with Rabin and Arafat.
Yeah, I know. Sorry, guys. Kurt and I are nerds when it comes to this stuff in history.
No, we're never-ending radical dudes.
We wear the coat of this stuff, so we apologize for taking you down these alleys of things that we happen to remember. But the upside of that, let me point this out. President Carter was steeped in the importance of understanding the country's history and how that was a rudder in terms of how we go forward. And one of the reasons, one of his catalyst, catalyst is not the right word. One of his energizing pieces of Habitat for Humanity is he grew up watching underprivileged people who did not have one of the most basic things, and that's housing.
A house. And he was a rich kid, too.
That's right. So he knew and understood that historically and how that would take that baseline would take people forward. So, y'all got to make sure you check your history because on any front. But yes.
And he's a fascinating guy. He's
really
a fascinating. I mean, he may seem like a boring man. He wore a sweater, and people say he was henpecked by the OPEC, and a one-term peanut farmer. But you know what? He was actually a fascinating man. Solar panels on the White House. Just imagine when he wanted to, change our energy consumption. He wanted 1977 consumption by the year 2000.
Yeah. Think about that for a second, guys. Think about that. What we could have had, what we could have had.
We wouldn't be 50 years behind the rest of the world in climate change.
And education, too. In education, too, my man.
He started the education department. Look what Trump wants to get rid of.
And yet we wonder why we have so many dumb A's in our community right now. We've had this consistent blocking of furthering education. Ironically, here's the thing about that. This is what people should understand. The presidents that have been elected that are Republicans in the last 50 years all went to what kind of schools? Not all, but went to
Ivy League schools,
or they were educated. Let's put it that way. Yep. I want to be fair in how I state that because Ford didn't go to an Ivy League school. He went to a Big Ten school.
No, he went to a Big Ten school, and Nixon went to Whittier College.
Right.
So, yeah.
Let me clean that up. But y'all get the point I'm making that we, as progressive liberal Democrats, have continually fought for things, and President Carter is a light post in this space on education, on climate change. Where would we be as a country had we continued to follow the path, or gone down the path of what he was trying to create? He was trying to clear a path.
We realized what a clean world we would be. I mean, and to his credit, Nixon did kind of start us on that path.
Yep.
But it took Carter to amplify it, and it took Reagan to tear it down.
I know.
And then of course Clinton with Al Gore. But Joe Biden was probably, I mean, to Clinton's credit and to Obama's credit as well, Joe Biden was actually the first one since Jimmy Carter to really amp it up again. I mean, can you imagine what Jimmy Carter could have done with an Inflation Reduction Act with the largest investment in environmental change in the history of the world?
Yeah.
Had he have had it?
That's the one thing I will say is we're talking about where we are currently, and then I'm gonna bounce you because I got a little quick break.
Yeah.
And just want to hear your thoughts on this, and I'm sure many people may have thought about this, and maybe others have not. But isn't it a blessing that we have Joe Biden still in office while we're going to go through this transition of President Carter's transition? Because Lord help us if we had to deal with that fool as president with this historical man passing away. Good Lord.
I'm just glad that for the next, I'm going to say probably for next week, we're going to be in a nation of mourning with a state funeral and the private funeral and all that other stuff. I'm just so glad that Joe Biden was asked to give the eulogy of Jimmy Carter by Jimmy Carter when he went into hospice.
It almost chokes me up that that's the case.
Two old codgers that did so much for this country.
I'm telling you. So, well,
thank you, Richard.
One nerd to another. Thank you for joining us.
Remember, NERD is an acronym for Never Ending Radical Dude.
That's our new T-shirts, man. All right, Kurt. Listen, good to hear your voice as always, man. Stay safe today.
Happy New Year,
Happy New Year, brother. Be well.
Yeah, thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye. That is my good man, Kurt Herner from Akron, Ohio. You can't get us in a room together to talk about this stuff because it's just, it is what it is. We'll take a quick break. 773-763-9278, guys. We'll be right back.
It's Choose Views with Richard Chew on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
Hey guys, welcome back to Choose Views, 773-763-9278. I want to give you guys space to talk about your memories about President Carter and how he impacted your life, how his policies may have, and the list goes on. Just, I'm getting some great texts. I got a nice text. Jimmy Carter was so steadfast. Don't forget, he was a nuclear engineer. And yeah, I'll have to clean this up. Don't forget the Reagan effery with Iran. So he was, I like that. That's a great, thank you, Al. Jimmy Carter was so steadfast. And yeah, he definitely was. And I appreciate that part about him as well. Devin, let's go to our good friend Pam here in Chicago. Good morning, Pam. Welcome to the show.
Good morning, Richard and Habarigani. We're in the midst of celebrating Kwanzaa.
Thank you, dear, for pulling my coat on that one. I appreciate that.
That's okay. Richard, I just want to say, President Carter just was a decent man. Mm-hmm. And I think we cannot take that for granted. I mean, just a decent man and loving to his family. And I believe he had a sincere love, for the country. Many presidents say that, but not many display it.
Right.
And I feel that he did that. Also, it seems that, I'm going to say in recent times, that Democratic presidents, they want to somehow uphold the institutions of our country, political institutions, the government. Mm-hmm. And that came to mind when President Carter didn't say anything about the release of the hostages. Mm-hmm. And nor did the media, as usual, kept closed mouth about it. So it just seems to me that moving forward, we're going to have our elected officials and our former presidents come out and tell the truth about some issues, Richard. And lastly, I'm going to say I appreciate how he loved his wife. I appreciate just, their relationship and how he spoke about her and the love.
Yeah, adoringly. I mean, I think about President Carter, and I think about, I adore my wife. I just do.
And I hear it in your voice. And I appreciate that, Richard. I hear that in your voice, and thank you for that. I don't take that lightly. Just as when, I hear women speak lovingly about their husbands. Family is important and is the foundation.
Yep.
So I appreciate that. Lastly, Richard, can I say this? Can we also, because I know we're coming upon this inaugural, but let's not forget we have Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King's birthday that is coming up on the 20th.
Yeah.
And it would have been a different celebration had VP Harris won. But let's not forget that Reverend Al Sharpton, and I hope you have him on, because he is going to have a celebration of King's birthday. And it is going to take place on the same day of the inaugural, on that birthday, in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
So we have to talk about that celebration, and let's not forget what Reverend Dr. King brought to light, and Jimmy Carter, had some, there were some issues with civil rights, and maybe you all can delve into that, because he couldn't quite come out and say what he wanted to say. But at the end, he did come out and do the right thing, acknowledge civil rights and everything that it offered. So
yeah. No,
I'm just putting those pieces together.
No, and I appreciate that, Pam, because the thing that I try to always say, and I don't always catch just right, but it's in my mind, it's in my heart, is that imperfection is what makes us better. And he knew that of himself based on the things that he shared with us. And I'll share this with you guys while I still have you on the line, Pam. This is coming from me as a young boy, as a teenage boy. One of the things that President Carter said that really impacted me when I was probably 15, 16 years of age, if y'all remember, he did an interview with Playboy magazine. And growing up in the church, as all of us may have, or in some way or another, where you're Catholic, Baptist, Jewish, Muslim, Buddhist, whatever your faith is or was, at that time, growing up in the church and growing up church-esque or church adjacent, there were certain things that you heard, like lust was a bad thing. And President Carter, he had an interview with Playboy magazine that he said that he had lusted after a woman, not his wife, and committed adultery many times in his heart.
Mm-hmm.
That was one of those moments where I was like, wow, this grown man who is president, not that he did it or that he said it, but he said it in the vein of being president. I was like, whoa. Do you know how that kind of clarity, that kind of transparency, what that does for a person, male or female, to hear someone that is, quote unquote, a respected person, a leader, a president of the United States, saying that, it allows you to go, it's okay to be imperfect. It's okay to wrestle with things that are not, that you may not be proud of, but you can acknowledge that they exist and then find a way to forge ahead. I'm telling you, Pam, that was such I remember that vividly to this day.
Yes. You reminded me, Richard, and because, of course, we all have felt that. We're human. So he just talked about the humanness in him and the flaws and was willing, to be transparent about that, even though... Exactly. I had forgot about that, Richard, but you're exactly right.
Yep. So, all right, Pam, I'm going to leave you with a smile on your face. I'm glad I made you chuckle a little bit, and thank you so much for being with us this morning and your contribution.
Thank you. But let's not forget about January 20th. That's a celebration for us with Reverend King, and we're still fighting for freedom. So, Richard, I don't want to let that pass.
I made a note of it.
We've got to make sure. Thank you.
All right, dear. Have a great day.
Okay. You too.
Bye-bye. All right, so we know we got some call. We're going to get you guys into the second hour because I don't want to blow you into the break. But I want to come back to what I said with Pam. First of all, thanks to Pam for always having observations and sharing them with us. Keeps us on our toes because she doesn't let stuff slip through, by the way. But yeah, that's a personal thing with me in terms of sharing that with you guys. But it's something that I'm sure many, many, many folks can appreciate. At least I hope so. That the transparency. It speaks to the honesty that he was willing to share with us, meaning President Carter. And to Pam's point about him being a decent man, a decent person. That decency is what I believe, was important to his presidency, but certainly post-presidency. And as I said a moment ago, how much he's done. He did post-presidency, kind of, not overshadows, but it casts a bigger shadow on his presidency. But there you go. All right, guys, we'll take a quick break. 773-763-9278. We will be right back.
Welcome to Choose Views with Richard Chew.
Get ready to dive into a world of insightful conversations and thought-provoking discussions.
As progressives, our job is to have an all-inclusive, full-on assault with all of our players.
A show that will focus on moving our political, social, economic, gender, and cultural conversation forward.
And all of our players means all of our players.
It's Choose Views. And now, here's your host, Richard Chew.
Hey, guys, welcome back to Choose Views, 773-763-9278. All right, guys, let me hit you with a couple of the, quote, housekeeping items. Today, from 2 to 5, John Augustine will be in for Joan, and his guests will include artificial intelligence and cybersecurity expert Dawn Christie, Julie Murphy, author of The Emotion Behind Money, Building Wealth from the Inside Out, and Chicago radio personality and TV personality Jennifer Weigel. Live, local, and progressive, weekdays 2 to 5 here on WCPT, and that's Central Time. And then tonight, of course, Driving It Home with Patty Vasquez will be driving you with political cartoonist Scott Stantis and positivity expert and podcaster Jen Zanotti with some motivational Monday advice. Plus, Patty will have a $25 gift card for Fry the Coop to the giveaway. Driving It Home with Patty Vasquez, 5 to 7 here on WCPT. And our new podcast, of course, Choose Views, 2 podcasts, Choose Views full episodes, and Choose Views featured interviews. You can subscribe to one or both and get those at Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeart, YouTube, Amazon, and TuneIn. So there you go. And speaking of the free giveaway or the $25 gift card for Fry the Coop, how about this as another way to help you guys out in terms of your poultry desires? Fry the Coop is the destination for what? Hot chicken in Chicagoland, giving a Southern original taste to the Midwest with the Midwest touch. Whether you want heat or no heat, featuring chicken sandwiches, tenders, chicken and waffles, and now nuggets, all delivering happiness to each crunchy bite, proudly not using seed oils, frying all of their menu items in 100% beef tallow. Stop by Fry the Coop today at one of the many locations from Oaklawn, Chicago, Elmhurst, Darien, Prospect Heights, Tinley Park, and Bolingbrook. Heat or mild or crazy insanity, whatever your flavor is. And to celebrate the holidays, we still have a couple of Fry the Coop WCPT gift cards available for, let's say, the third caller that calls in will get that gift card. And, of course, contests running on WCPT are open to listeners 18 or older and residents of the greater Chicagoland, Northwest Indiana area. 1 entry per person, 1 winner per household. Void where prohibited by law. Listeners may only win or qualify to win once every 30 days. Complete rules are available on our website at WCPT.com by clicking the contest tab. So, yeah, third caller gets a Fry the Coop $25 gift card from us. There you go. So, guys, as we talk about President Carter, we're going to grab a couple calls in a moment. One of the other things that I wanted to, I was reminded of, is that he was also one to pardon Vietnam evaders. Let's say draft dodgers, but Vietnam folks have decided to stay out of the war. Let's put it that way. So another good thing that he did, because a lot of people saw that war as something we shouldn't have been involved in the first place. Controversial, and the list goes on. But more kudos to late President Jimmy Carter. And I've got lots of good feeling about his work as president and the things that he did to make the country better and make the world better post his presidency. And you guys should be leaning into that as well, because I think that as you lean into that, you'll realize the goodness of people that, like Pam said, a previous caller, that are just good people. So that's kind of where your guy is this morning in that space. And before we grab some calls, I want to. Devin's busy right now, so I'm going to give him a moment to navigate what he's doing with the phones. But I have a clip that I thought you guys would appreciate that speaks very simply to President Carter, and it comes from the legendary Bob Dylan.
Oh, it's impossible to define Jimmy. Think of him as a simple kind of man, like in the Leonard Skinner song. He takes his time, doesn't live too fast. Troubles come, but they will pass. Find a woman and find love, and don't forget there's always someone above. There's many sides to him. He's a nuclear engineer, woodworking carpenter. He's also a poet. He's a dirt farmer. If you told me he was a race car driver, I wouldn't even be surprised.
It's up to every one of us to make a basic decision. This is a kind of person that I want to be.
Yeah, that's a good tribute from the great Bob Dylan. In terms of the conversation around peace, and how one of the things that Dylan said and others have said who've called in this morning, and some of the texts that I've received from you guys, my man Kurt Mullett, my good friend Kurt Mullett, he posted something that I thought is representative, and what Pam said earlier reminded me that I wanted to play you guys this clip in terms of what Reverend Al Sharpton is going to be doing on Dr. King's birthday on the 20th, which is also the inauguration day. But Kurt posted something this weekend about the march, the gathering that's going to be taking place that I felt was important for you guys to know about, or to at least kind of get Kurt's perspective in this space. So we've got a little bit of a clip that we want to play for you here.
So lately, I've been posting a lot of content about the 14th Amendment, Section 3, and the march that is going to take place on January 3rd in D.C. A peaceful protest. No gallows being built. No beating of cops and security. No breaking of windows. No knocking down doors. No climbing walls. None of that. It will be a peaceful protest to let our voices be heard, and for our representatives in Congress to understand what the people want in this country. And what we want is them to honor our Constitution and to apply the 14th Amendment, Section 3, to the felon, because he is an insurrectionist. Plain and simple, period. He was impeached for being an insurrectionist. And there is no court in this land that has said he is not an insurrectionist. So come January 3rd, if you can, please go to D.C. and be part of this protest and march. If you are unable to go to D.C., which many of us cannot, please go to nowmarch.org and join the fight. Make some phone calls. If you know the emails to your representatives, send them emails. But make phone calls. Let your voices be heard. Let them know this is what the people want in this country. We want them to honor the laws of our Constitution, in particular, the 14th Amendment, Section 3. That's what we want. Let the vote be brought up in Congress. That way, it will be on paper. And then we will be able to see which members of Congress decided to uphold the laws of the Constitution or to vote against them. Look, he's a Russian asset. Elon Musk is a Russian asset. This whole election was corrupted by Russia. This is the only reason that he is the president-elect. The only reason. I mean, doesn't it make sense now, some of the things that were said earlier this summer? Like, we don't really need your votes, or you will never have to vote again, or how about we've got a surprise for you? It all makes sense now, doesn't it? The facts are the facts. He's an insurrectionist, and he should not be allowed to hold office. No one who took part in the insurrection should be allowed to hold office. That's what the Constitution says. So if you believe in the law of the land, if you believe in the Constitution, please join this fight. Lock arms with us. Let your voices be heard. This is what needs to be done. Now is not the time to surrender. Now is the time to let our voices be heard. So please, do whatever you can, but don't be silent. And this is not a crazy idea. All we are asking is that the constitutional law of the 14th Amendment, Section 3, be honored. Period.
There you go. Passionate statement and push from our man Kurt Mullett, Hoosier Blue 63. Let's go to Brian before we go to this quick break. Brian, thanks for holding, man. Welcome to the call. Welcome to the show. Thanks for your call.
Well, thank you for taking my call. The reason I'm calling is, first of all, I share the accolades and sadness of the loss of Jimmy Carter, but I want to correct the one caller who was doing violence to the memory of Senator Edward M. Kennedy. He was elected. He became senator in 1963 and passed away in 2009. In early fall 1979, he was leading in the polls over Jimmy Carter by 60 to 30%, and there was a big draft Ted movement, and he accepted the draft. And I think it should be kept in mind, Senator Kennedy was his progressive and liberal credentials from 1963 to his death in 2009 are impeccable. And he is kind of like a Bernie Sanders for those who are too young to remember. He supported Barack Obama for president. So I wanted to clarify that for me and for everyone else. He was a very good senator. And in regards to Jimmy Carter, in an AP article in 2000, he left the Southern Baptist Convention, which I guess is the largest evangelical church, and he was a member of that since he was a kid. And he left it because they no longer would allow to have women ministers, and they were teaching sexist tripe like women who get married must obey their husbands and everything. And so he went to a more liberal church. So I'm very saddened by the passing of Jimmy Carter. I think he's a very good man. I just don't think it does any good to do violence to the memory of Senator Kennedy.
I appreciate your comments, Brian. Thank you for that clarity, and thanks for your contribution to the show this morning.
Thank you.
All right, Brian, have a good day. Good points. Absolutely good points. And excuse me, guys. One of the things that a lot of people don't know about President Carter is that he made that shift, and he was, He was willing to take the hits for making that shift in terms of the church, because that was a powerful organization at that time, and still does have it still is a powerful organization. So kudos to Brian for reminding us of that. We're going to take a quick break, guys. 773-763-9278. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to Choose Views with Richard Chu on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
Hey, guys, welcome back to Choose Views, 773-763-9278. So there's another person that, in my observation, there's a lot of times you have to look at the entire body of work for folks, and you get a better sense of the things that they were going after. And that's kind of what Brian was pointing out about Ted Kennedy. His entire body of work was pretty doggone fabulous. And so we get that. And what was happening at the time with that election or that election season put us in a weird spot. And, that happens with primarying. And so I remember it. It's interesting that someone sent me a text earlier that said, are you old enough to remember this? And I'm like, yeah, I am, talking about President Carter. But where I'm going with this is we lost another person. I say lost, but we had another person that passed away that was political adjacent in terms of work that she did. And that's the actress Linda Lavin. Let me point out why I want to say something about her. There are many women actresses that are generational. They're generational setting. What do I mean by that? They acted, that was their profession, but they also understood, because of their gender, how their voice was important. And we can go way in the way back machine. Many people don't know that Marilyn Monroe was a strong civil rights advocate. Many people don't know that were it not for her that, there were black performers that wouldn't have had well, I shouldn't say were it not for her, but because of her, with her assistance, not were it not for her, but because of her activism, that, black female performers were able to perform in certain venues. Because Marilyn was so hot, no pun intended, Marilyn was so popular that she made it clear that I won't perform here if you don't allow certain women to perform here as well. So my point of all this is there's a generation of women who fought for rights of women in the arts, but also rights of women in civil activity. And Linda Lavin was one of those voices. She fought for social and women's rights, as many women of her generation did. So in this conversation about President Carter, I want to include Linda Lavin because she, like many other women at that time, saw that they had a dual responsibility. Younger actresses have to remember that they stand on the shoulders of the folks like Marilyn Monroe. And Marilyn wasn't just about being the blonde bombshell and all the other things that are associated with her. She was a strong civil rights advocate. Linda Lavin was as well. And there are many other women who are. And a lot of the, current Jane Fonda, obviously. Everybody knows about Jane because of some of the things that tied into the Vietnam War. And a lot of people don't like Jane Fonda because of what she did, but she stood for something, and she still does. And I'll put Jane Fonda up against anybody when it comes to standing up for social rights and human rights any day of the week. And that's what, the point I want to make around Linda Lavin. So in your thoughts out to the universe, remember her as well, because she was someone that was an advocate for social and women's rights. And I didn't want to leave her out of the conversation in that space. A little bit of a pivot as we come to the last half hour of the show. The thing that, and I say a little bit of a pivot, I'm going to put it this way. I'm going to tie it to something. One of the things that President Carter was not is he wasn't someone that ran as a Democrat and then decided he was going to shift parties after getting elected, like a handful of Republicans have done in recent times on a state level in terms of state legislatures, as well as on a national level in terms of Congress. I'll give you an example. We know about folks like Kirsten Sinema, who went from running as and getting elected as a Democrat to then saying, I'm going to become an independent. I don't like being part of the Democratic Party anymore. What such privilege you have, Kirsten, to do that. And Joe Manchin, same thing. If you're going to be an independent, then run as an independent. Don't shift. And then Nancy Mace, and there's a few others. But most recently, down in Florida, State Representative Hillary Castle of Dania Beach announced her switch from the Democratic to the Republican Party. This took place over the weekend. Tampa Representative Susan Valdez did the same on December 9th. So this bait and switch is certainly something that President Carter did not do. And it's to be noted that, let me put it to you this way. It's time for the Democratic Party to start to go, and I say this want to say this the right way. They need to politically go after those people who switch parties, and they run as Democrats, get elected, and they shift parties to Republicans or independents. Run as that. Stop lying to people. I mean, there's some bait and switch. It's unacceptable. And to some extent, in my mind, there's a little bit of fraud in there. And here's where I come down on this. You're going to take the money of folks who see you as a Democrat, running as a Democrat. So you get money from Democrats to run your election, to run your campaign, and to then win. And then you're going to be salty enough to say, well, I'm not going to stay with the Democratic. I'm switching to the Republican Party. Then you need to send the money back to the people that helped you get elected. Plain and simple. I'm that cold-blooded and cold-hearted about it. Send the money back to all the people that donated to your campaign, because basically you did pull a bait and switch on them. You said, I'm running for the things that you believe in as a Democrat. I need your money to help me get elected. I need your support. I need you to knock on some doors for me, send out some cards, make some phone calls, and all the other things that happen in the campaign, whether it's a state election, a federal election, or anything else. And then you switch parties. We can't stop you from switching parties, but you need to. And that can be enacted with legislation. This is where policy can fix a problem. If you switch parties within a certain period of time of being elected, you have to return all of the campaign dollars you received. If I were a state legislator or a federal legislator, you can darn sure believe that that would be something I would be running up the flagpole. If you run as a certain on a certain party ticket, you need to stay in that party for half the term that you're allowed to until your next, you got to stay for a year. If you're running a two-term as a U.S. Congress, state legislature, whatever the number is, you got to stay for at least 50% of the time. Or you can't run, take something away, or you can't run again. You have to wait a full term before you can run again. In other words, let's just say that you run as a Democrat in South Carolina, and then you decide to flip parties, once you get into Congress and get sworn in. So, okay, you flip parties. Two things should happen. One, send all the money back. And two, you can fulfill your term, but you can't run again in the next cycle. You have to wait an entire cycle before you can run again. How about that to salty you up a little bit? That's how I see it. And it doesn't matter if you go from Republican to Democrat or Democrat to Republican. Even if you move to becoming an independent, you have to wait a term. You have to sit out and then start all over again. That's what should happen, because this party switching garbage has got to go. And I would tell you that should be part of our federal election campaign guidelines. And on a state level with state legislators, there should be, that should be in place as well, because that's just garbage. That's flat out garbage. I'm tired of seeing these folks run as your everyday, and this is what frustrates me about it even further. They're telling people that we're the party of the people. We're the party of, American family values. But all during that time, they're lying to people about what they really believe and what they're going to do. They didn't suddenly get to office and after 6 weeks or 6 months go, oh, I can't stand this party. That wasn't their goal. There's a trend of it starting. It's happening at a faster pace than I've seen in my entire life of being involved in this political conversation. And President Carter didn't do that. So we need to. This is a conversation that needs to be had by all of our legislators. I don't care. And Mayor Adams in New York, he wants to switch the Republican Party. We know why, because they're busting his chops. He shouldn't be allowed to run again for mayor for a full cycle. He's got to step out, not run again, and then come back. Because it's not even a question of being fair. It's just outright stupid to let that continue as a society. We can't stand for that. And I'm unapologetically going to say it out loud. And I would say it to each and every one of their faces. If I were confronted or confronting them with this, I'd say it to their faces. You should be forced to return the money and sit out. But of course, Sinema and Manchin, they're punking out and they're no longer, they're leaving. But these folks are going to run for another term. So they got to give up something. So there you go, guys. That's what I have to say about that. President Carter didn't do that, by the way. All right, guys, take a quick break. 773-763-9278. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Choose Views with Richard Chew on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
Hey guys, welcome back to Choose Views, 773-763-9278. So yeah, I'm a little fired up about this party switching garbage. And so I'm starting to throw some flames now. President Carter would not have done that. So I'll put it in that vein. I'm going to still give him his flowers about the things that he probably would not have done. And you know what he probably also wouldn't have done? He wouldn't have said to people that he wanted to buy Greenland. He wouldn't have been a punk about supporting Ukraine and Poland. And he wouldn't have been a punk about trying to say, I'm going to go down and grab the Panama Canal. He wouldn't have even thought about that. And he sure as hell wouldn't have been so disrespectful to our neighbors to the north in terms of Canada and its territorial rights. Because he realized that he was working for the American people, not for Vlad. And so, just so you guys understand this, I'm going to play a clip. Devin and I put together this clip, but I want to kind of go through. Greenland has a major military facility, and it's designed to assist NATO in protecting Europe from foreign aggression, like Ukraine, like the Putin invasion of Ukraine. Because y'all know, if you're either stupid, and I know there's some people who listen to the show that profess that call themselves experts in terms of NATO, and you may be, and are against what's happening in Ukraine. Well, Joe Biden didn't invade Ukraine. Vladimir Putin did. And you can try to rationalize all day long as to the reason why. But the point still remains that President Carter probably would be supporting the work that we're doing to support a nation that was invaded, a sovereign nation. And Panama has sanctions against Russian vessels traveling through the canal. Putin wants those sanctions lifted. Canada has territorial rights in Arctic oil gas reserves and the maritime routes that Putin wants to have demolished. So MAGA, y'all need to check yourselves when it comes to what you voted for. Y'all got duped. We tried to tell you, and those three things are all directly, just like the Secretary Clinton said about it all works its way back to Russia. And how can you be so doggone stupid, selfish, arrogant, willfully ignorant to not have seen that this is what this was all about? We tried to tell you. And so when I put this in the vein of we tried to tell you, here's another thing we tried to tell you about, that this conversation around immigration and making it be a brown people's thing and a southern border thing, or the border, now you got duped again, because two of your people that you favored during this election, Vivek and Elon, who one is an immigrant to the United States, the other's parents are, and it's questionable as to if his father had gone through all the processes. And when we talk about birthright citizenship. So what am I saying here? Y'all got duped when it comes to this H-1B visas. Because now two of your favorites are saying that Americans, white Americans particularly, are too damn stupid and not as smart as folks from the Indian-esque nations. Y'all know what I'm saying? Do the research. But no, you Democrats don't know anything. And this is what frustrates me about Democrats eating their Democratic voices, if you will, since the election, going after Vice President Harris and Democrats saying, you guys screwed up, you blew the election. No, the people on the right were duped. They were duped because they wanted it to be about race, and we got to keep the others out. That's what you really wanted. You just don't have the guts to admit it. And those who say I'm not political, BS. Stop sitting on the sidelines and saying, it does affect you. And if you don't see that it affects you, then this is what you end up getting. Because now, this is what's hilarious about it. And I'm going to say this for a moment. Black folks have been trying to say for the longest time that there's monsters in the closet, there's monsters under the bed. Now they're in the sheets. They're stripping the bed. They are. And those monsters are the voices like Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk and Peter Thiel, and the list goes on of people who are now that happen to have immigrant, one generation, if that, not even a generation, a short lifetime here, that are telling white Americans that y'all are too damn stupid to compete and y'all are lazy. Sound familiar? MAGA, you know what do you hear me? And if you are a progressive liberal Democrat and you have folks that are MAGA that you kind of, you try to keep the peace with them, no, stick it in their face. Stick it in their face. Don't keep the peace with them, because when you keep the peace with them with this kind of garbage, they win, because they don't want to talk about the fact that they got insulted by the people that they said were going to be their saviors. So stick it right back in their face and tell them, no, I'm not going to accept that. And like I said, Devin and I put together this clip that we'd like to hear if you guys hear the one on Panama. Go for it.
So Greenland has a major military facility that's there to help protect NATO and Europe in case of a foreign attack from, Russia, basically. And Canada has the rights to this bunch of oil and natural gas reserves, as well as the maritime routes for them. And Putin wants those demolished. Now, Panama currently has sanctions against Russian vessels traveling through the Panama Canal. So when Donnie is talking about all three of these places, it's on behalf of Vlad. Just like everything that he's done since he was bailed out by Russia in the 80s after he lost all of his daddy's money in bankrupt hotels and casinos in Atlantic City. See, those of us that have been paying attention and that read about history know this shit, and we've seen this coming for a long time. Now, MAGA is the brainchild of Vlad, and Donnie is his puppet, and all of you suckers that voted for him have done nothing more than give him more power to Russia and turn this country over to them. The United States is now weaker and more vulnerable because of you. Sometimes I wish I was as stupid as all you MAGA so I could live my life in total ignorant bliss thinking that Daddy Donnie is just going to make everything better for me. Y'all are a bunch of soft, whiny little the fascists. Do not comply.
Do not comply. Don't go to Mar-a-Lago. But see, some of y'all are camped out. Some of the MAGA folks are camped out at Mar-a-Lago. Because like this gentleman in the clip said, and I thought this was spot on. This is why I wanted to go here. You all elected this 34XCF. 34XCF. Why? Not because of the price of a doggone thing. You got lied to and you drank it down like your favorite alcoholic beverage on New Year's Day. That's what happened. You just willfully, you have so much hate in your heart and disdain for the others that you voted. And I'm talking, and this is the thing that's so interesting. I'm not just talking about the quote unquote uninformed parts of MAGA. I'm talking about the informed part of the Republican Party. That's who I'm also talking about. And those who sit on the sidelines, or those who say that I don't do politics, and those who say that politicians are all the same, I'm talking to you all too. Or those of you who are followers of our effort that have people in your life that fit that description. We're talking to those people because they said, we know more, we're going to stand aside, we don't need to participate, I'm too good for politics, I don't do politics, and all this other garbage. And now the real truth, and see, this is what's going to keep happening. This is why I want Democrats to be stout and to put up your dukes, not necessarily literally, to bring your sledgehammer, not necessarily literally, but with our ideas and our thoughts and our energy. It's going to take that. And we can honor President Carter today in talking about his great life, but I promise you that if you were sitting in a room talking with him, he would challenge you to fight. And I never met him, but I just look at his body of work, and that was fighting. He fought harder after leaving the White House than he did while he was in the White House, one could say. So right now, to the MAGAs out there that y'all got duped, this is just a start, because you were too arrogant and willfully ignorant and biased to not see that the razor blade was at your own wrist. And it's coming, y'all. It's truly coming. The two of the people you favor basically said to white America, y'all stupid and lazy. That's what they said. So kudos to the infight. All right, Devin, let's go to Cindy over in Michigan. Hey, Cindy, good morning and welcome to Choose Views.
I haven't talked to you in a while, Richard. This is Township Cindy in Michigan.
Hey, how are you?
Okay.
Hey, Cindy.
Got through our election.
I'm sorry, dear. That has great shelf life. The fact that on the family meeting back in the day that Eric was like, what is a township? I love Eric to death, but I was shocked to hell. Like, what? You don't know what a township is? So anyhow, what's going on, my friend? How are you?
So, yeah, I always say that because then it, puts a name on, who I am and stuff. The people that are switching parties, well, I don't think that's an accident. I mean, I think it is a coordinated effort by Republicans. They know certain areas are democratically, dominant.
Yep.
So they stick somebody in there and they say all these certain things that they think they're going to play. They get money from the Democratic Party and they raise money from individuals. And, they used all of the infrastructure of the Democratic Party to get elected. And then they just, I don't think I'm a Democrat. I can't go that way. You made that decision overnight.
Right.
Really.
That's a bunch of BS.
That's coordinated. And they're doing this. It's an infiltration of the Democratic Party. I'm sure Democrats have done it here and there, but this is like, they're wallpapering the country this way.
Yeah.
And then
so Cindy,
I'm also
let me ask you this question though. What do you think should happen? I mean, you and I can talk about it all day long in terms of what we know is happening,
right,
how they got there, and what we think about it. But what do you think should happen?
Well, this would be something that if you can't get legislation, and you probably can't because you have to have Republicans come in on it, since they're coordinating it, it's not going to happen probably. But there are things within the Democratic Party that could be done where they have to pay the money back, like you said, and they have to maybe there's even a lawsuit where it's put in open court. What was the thinking that went behind this? Who were your contacts? What who talked to you? This is the kind of thing that
I think the Democrats. If you were a political organizer in a community or in an area, a district or a state where a person ran that way and they were all down with what the Democrats wanted and the folks in that community were voting for, on and on and on, that legal standing would rest with the organizers in that that group. For example, you and I are the head of the XYZ Democratic group that's raising money for a candidate that's running as a Democrat, and then he or she, after getting elected, flips parties. You and I that were in charge of fundraising and other logistical matters and operational matters would probably legally have standing to go after that person because they utilize our resources to get elected and then decided to change.
And my thoughts would be less about the money and all of that than it is about the what happened to make this happen.
Yeah, good point.
To expose it in some sort of open court area. Who were your contacts? Who did you talk to prior to this? What was there are things that are going on that people talking to each other. They didn't get approached after they won. They'd been approached before they won, before they even started running. So there's people that'll come out of nowhere and then off of a school board or something, and then they'll, decide I need to run. But where did they get their outside money, et cetera? So there's a way that the Democrats could do this if they were really interested in finding out. And maybe they are, I don't know the inside track on that. The other thing I'm thinking is, just talking about all the things that are going on where, Trump wants to buy up. He thinks it can just buy it up, like a property. I want to buy Canada. It's a threat. It's just a threat, and he always wins by threatening. And we the thing that I noticed, and this is probably why you haven't heard from me for a while, because I was so devastated through the election. It's the day integrity died, is how I felt.
Mm-hmm.
There's an integrity level for every person, and the way our government is going to be run is the day integrity died. And so the Democratic Party, I feel right now, when people talk about, well, we need to appeal to this person and we need to be more this and that, I think, no, just stand with integrity, because all of these disillusioned people are going to have to go somewhere.
Good point.
They're going to suddenly go, well, I didn't know he was going to do all that. I didn't know he was going to cheat this. I didn't know. Well, you did, but come to our safe place. We have to create a safe house for some of these people that were not the total racists. They were just, got brainwashed, kind of. There's a movie.
Go ahead. Sorry.
There's a movie that I enjoy. It's a 1950s movie. It was made in 1950 with Judy Holliday and William Holden, Born Yesterday.
Okay.
And it's about how she is a total dimwit. The dumb blonde, the typical dumb person who has been apolitical, has no interest in anything. And through a series of situations, she has to learn about the government, be educated, learn how to speak to people. And William Holden becomes her teacher, takes her all over Washington, which is where they're at, and shows her the monuments and what they mean and teaches her things. And she's the one that her eyes become open. That's why it's called Born Yesterday.
Okay.
And her eyes open up. And I really recommend it, because one of the lines in it is he says to her, she's talking about some selfish people, and he says, well, there's selfish people. There's two kinds of people. There's selfish people and there's unselfish people. And when a whole lot of selfish people create a government, it's called fascism. He doesn't mince words. And there's something going on in her personal life that's sort of the representation of the public life.
Got it.
And so I don't want to ruin the movie for people who haven't seen it. Do not see the one with Don Johnson and Melanie Griffith. It's not worth it. It's the original. And that's where all the good dialogue comes from. And when I heard that, I thought that puts it right where it's at. There are unselfish people. There's a lot of unselfish people who did vote for Trump. I know a few. And they just got totally hoodwinked.
Yeah. I got to tell you, Cindy, first of all, thanks for that recommendation, because I'm a fan of old movies, of all movies, but certainly that style. And I wrote it down. I know the actors. I know the name of the movie. I just haven't watched it, but that might be on my New Year's Day list of movies to watch. So thank you for that. Listen, I know that you and I both know this, and millions of people know this across the country, then folks that listen to us, that there are people who got hoodwinked. And we know that there are folks who were susceptible to being hoodwinked. The challenge is going to be if we, quote, say, all right, we're going to welcome you. Now that you've written, it's kind of the litmus test thing. Walk with me on this for a minute, Cindy. If we're going to let them back into the sandbox, they're going to have to sit down and listen this time. Because we told them when they got on the bus, put your seatbelt on. Don't be walking around, because if we hit a bump, you might get your head bumped. Remember that? Remember? Because I know you took a bus to school, because I know where you went to school. You know what I'm talking about. Come on now.
We don't have a seatbelt in our.
I know we didn't. But we were told to sit our behinds down, right? Come on, Cindy. Don't play with me.
Yes.
You were told to sit down, and if you got up and walked around when the school bus hit the bump, you got thrown onto one of those hard seats with the metal, frame. So this time, Cindy, if we're going to let those people who decided to get up and walk around on the bus when the bus driver said, go sit down, and your mother and father told you to sit down, we have to take them through a different funnel, through a different, strainer if this time, because we told them to listen the last two or three times. They didn't want to listen, Cindy. So if we're going to let them,
That's right.
I would just walk with me again. I would almost rather work on getting the people who sat on the sidelines to get in the game than trying to change the people who, even though they may have gotten hoodwinked, they got hoodwinked because they didn't listen.
Well, some of those people that sat on the sidelines are also hoodwinked because they have this thing where they say to themselves, well,
they're
no
all the same, right? No, I got a few folks.
They're all the same. And I always have to kind of, well, not really. And I got to get real picky about, well, this one does this, but this one thinks like this. You know, it's real, it's just, ugh.
Either way. No, Cindy, I've got both in my world, just like you. So I don't want to sound like I don't have. No, I have the same personality of non-voters because they don't think that they think everybody's the same and blah, blah, blah. And then they've got people who say, oh, I'm not interested in, but I got that, as well as the people like, no, Richard, listen, they're going to do so we have both. But the point is, and then I'm going to let you go. Sorry. We just have to be a little bit more stringent in terms of letting them back into the conversation. They got to sit their behinds down and listen and not get bumped on the head because they stood up on the bus.
Yeah.
I'm so glad I made you laugh about that memory from growing up in a township school where the bus had to pick you up.
Yep.
All right, Cindy. Happy New Year, dear.
Richard.
I'm so glad you're well.
New Year.
And we got you, so we're going to get through this together, okay?
Well, I'll try to shoot an email once in a while just to let you know, hey, I'm out here.
Gotcha. Cool. All right, Cindy. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Mm-hmm.
There you go, guys. Cindy from a township in Michigan. I'm not going to tell y'all where because I don't want you bothering my buddy over there. But she's good people, and she is a strong progressive that's in a red area. So she brings it to the party every time. So let's go to Victor real quickly. The northwest side of the United States of America. Good morning, friend. How are you?
Good morning, Mr. Richard Chew. I just want to say real quickly that a Democrat that runs as a Democrat and then switches party as soon as he is elected is committed a crime. This is illegal. It's a bait and switch operation, and it's prosecutable under the law.
And it's a state, and the state, when a person does it, the state actually has the initial standing and purview to go after them, or the state officials, I should say, because they use they have to, God, I don't want to go nerdy again. I'll just keep it there. Sorry, Victor, go ahead.
No, well, you're exactly right. And you can bring up, the DNC can bring up actions and against these people that try to do this bait and switch. But I believe that the reason why this is happening at such a high incident is that the Republicans know that in this next election cycle, no one is going to vote Republican, period. So they need to get their people in there one way or another. That's part of the problem. And President Jimmy Carter was the only president that brokered a deal in the Middle East with Egypt and Israel that still stands today. That was in 1979.
Yep.
Well, we need to see if Donald Trump wants to match that. He should go to Gaza and broker a deal with Hamas and Benjamin Netanyahu. But, he's too much of a chicken to do anything anyway.
That's right.
He said he was going to end the wars over there. Let's see how far that goes anyway in Ukraine and Russia and the Middle East. I'm really anticipating nothing is going to happen.
I agree.
Okay, well, that's about all I got to give today.
All right, Victor.
So, Richard, you keep up the good work, and we're going to make you president one day.
Not if my wife has anything to say about it. That ain't going to happen. All right, man. Be well, Victor, and thanks for the call and your contribution to the show today.
Thank you. Take care.
Take care. Bye now. Oh, man. That is probably not going to happen if I plan on staying married, and I plan on staying married not as long as President Carter, but certainly I'm going to push the envelope to get out there and those big numbers. So, and listen, guys, let me just say this about what Victor said, and in all due respect. And Eric Grant and I have talked about this on a number of occasions, on air and off the air. If that were to ever be a course that one would go down, meaning me, the one thing you could count on is I would speak my truth about the things that need to get done. I would not be, and that's not to say that other presidents, Democratic presidents, haven't done that or don't do that. So let me be careful there. But I think that if there's anything that Donald Trump has appealed to, is that he says the stuff that people are thinking but don't have the courage to say themselves. I think that's a fair statement to make. Not that it's always on point, but it's what people are thinking. And I think there's room for that when it comes to our our officials that are elected to Democratic offices. And Vice President Harris definitely went down that road. So kudos for her. And I hope she's doing well. I really do. She served us well. There you go, guys. Kudos out to the late Jimmy Carter. Great president, great man, and glad to have had him in our life for all these years. Thanks, guys, for being with us. As always, take a deep breath, make your life count. We will see you tomorrow.